Hi, I'm Andrew Swan. I'm an 8th grade social studies teacher in Massachusetts, and I hate letter grades. Letter grades just seem kind of like a necessary evil, and I've dealt with them and will continue having to until, I guess, my school system changes its mind. They're a very common language with students and with parents as well, but they're really imperfect. And particularly I find in a flipped mastery environment, when I'm trying to get students to remediate, right? Like to rewatch the video and fix up what they've learned so we can dig into other things. How does that translate into this? And another thing that I tell to my students too is that letter grades are not the reality of the real world. Letter grades are only used in school and sometimes for like eggs or meat, right? Like grade A. You never see like grade B or grade C meat or eggs, at least I never have. So what do these things really even mean? In the real world, where we live, that's not how it works. Even as teachers, we're not, maybe where you work, but I've never been graded on in terms of letter grades. It's more something like this. I've been working on this kind of thing for a few years. And I think I've boiled it down to these 5. For any kind of thing that you know or are able to do, it really just boils down to these 5 things up here. At some point, you don't get it. Whatever it is, you don't get how to do it. And then you sort of move along this spectrum here, and maybe at some point, true mastery is when you totally get whatever that thing is. So let me use some examples like I've used with my students here. So like, right, like, throwing a ball. At some point, like little babies don't get how to do it. They're like, what is? And they start like eating it, trying to eat it or something. Your top baseball pitchers, for example, totally get how to even make the ball like curve a bit, and like they can change speeds in a way that most of us can't. At the very least, that we get the concept of how to throw a ball, or also like tying a shoe. When I demonstrate this for students, I'll actually keep looking at them while, I'll pull up my shoe, and like start like tying it and show that like I totally get how to do this. But at one point, right, like all of us didn't get how to do it, or we only sort of got how to tie a shoe. This is just the natural kind of progression, I think. And really like the way of like just getting it is the, that's proficiency. Or for something like, right, like being able to say the alphabet. Again, at some point, that's hard, or like you sort of get, but maybe you skip a couple of letters or something when you were younger. You have to like learn this. If you totally get, so I'll ask my students, and maybe you could think like, what would it mean to like totally get how to say the alphabet? I guess one way would be, right, like you don't even have to think about it. You can just go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, right, like zoom all the way through. Or can you do it backwards? Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, and so on. Then you totally get how to do it. And as a civics teacher, this is another one that I use, right? Like, can you identify reliable news sources? I won't get into that one right now with this crowd. But maybe that just sort of helps you see like how these things would move along from one to the other. And okay, well, at some point you do have to do letter grades. That's just, again, like I said, that's something we can't really like avoid. So here, this pretty much sums it up. Maybe you'd already figured this out, right? So if you get it, that would be proficiency. And I think that's a B, right? The highest possible grade would be for the highest possible level. And if you don't get it, you fail to be able to do that. And then, that's the D and the C, right? Like almost there, I think, would be that middle kind of letter grade. I'm not dealing with pluses and minuses. But because the reality, right, is like we usually have to do some kind of letter grades. So this is how you can kind of translate it into that kind of language and sort of transition students and parents to understanding these. But let's go back. Let me show you how I actually use this in practice. And well, this is probably going to look like a lot here. I call this the mission tracker. And I give students a copy of a sheet of this, and I color coded. So this is like the purple one. So this is one I gave to students back in, it's been October of 2019 here. And again, it's a lot. So I don't show this way to students all at once. But if I do just sort of zoom in here, right, like this is that level of sort of getting it. And then again, like moving along like the progression here. I'm not filling in things for all 5 of those levels. I found that was just way too much to have. This is already enough, right? But if we look at like each row is a learning objective. Each row is one of the standards, right? If we're talking about standard-based grading, what's the standard? What am I trying to have them learn and be able to do? So for this one, this was a unit on leadership and right, elections. So this would be proficiency. Basically, right? If you get it, if you can explain how elections work in the United States at an 8th grade level, you get it. And now we already know that that's what I would call a B grade. Or this one was about leadership, and then you've got the other one here, which I'll come to because that was a little bit different. And what I've provided though with these deliberately like shaped check boxes is you have done or you have not done these things here. So let me just zoom in on one of these for you here. So if you can recognize several traits of good leadership. So here's where the flipping comes in, okay? Here's where the video piece. The video lessons I made were really for these levels. Newton is the city where I work, so that's why it says Newton government. But these were 3 different things. I used 2 different video lessons actually for these. So one was again about these kinds of leadership roles, and then could you at least name an example? So for example, like the mayor would be an executive. The superintendent is a manager, okay? There you go, you're getting some civics out of this. And a separate thing we did was about traits of leadership. So I'll come to that. So you need to be able to do those things here. And we spend about 2 weeks on this mission here, you know, give or take an assembly day or like a holiday or something like that. And students have as many opportunities as they need to be able to show understanding. I do that within class quizzes. You might do some other kind of way here. But as I move over, so to get it meant to be able to do this, meant to be able to identify the most important traits. So again, if we go back at the very basic, I wanted them to have some pros and cons of some of these traits of leadership. We went over like 9 of them, okay? And then, right, but do they get it? Can they identify what are some of the most important, right? Because that again goes back to what the mission was. And this is where the class part comes in. So what we did was we spent class time looking at websites of candidates, this is in October, running for election in Newton. And they had to use those traits to be able to judge the candidate they thought would be the best. So that's what we were doing in class in pairs. We were doing some laptop-based research. I was there to be able to help them out with that. You know, if a link didn't work or something like that, that's when they needed me. They didn't need me, at least not in person, for these basics. That's the part that I flipped. And then the idea of like totally getting it, again, by the end of those 2 weeks, they need to do one or the other of these. So let me show you exactly how I would assess these. I'll go to the top traits one first. So to get it, this was a Google Doc. They had like these 2 parts to fill in. I was looking for about a paragraph. Again, I flipped it a bit, giving them the link to the reminder video, what they needed to show that they'd understood before. And once I get something, so they submit it. If I tell them, no, that's not quite right, or you've done one and not the other, then I'm not yet going to be checking off that box, okay, to get this box checked off. And again, going back, right, like for the best candidate, that would have been like a little bit further down, and that would be to get this box checked. So if they've got one and not the other, maybe they don't fully get, they almost get it. So they're not yet at the level of a B. Let's think positive though. Let's say they've done those things, and in the time when maybe other students are doing the revision, and in class we're doing some other kind of class discussions, they got to choose between these 2. And I'll show you again, like here was the choice. So they could do one of these, or they could do the other. They could focus on a candidate. Remember, there used to be many candidates for president at that point. Or they could do the informed judgment, which is frankly what most of them did. It's about how closely should representatives follow popular opinion, right? Should they like vote the way that people want, or are they getting elected to make their own decisions? And that gets deeper into this concept of what representatives are supposed to do, and what leadership means. So I'd love every student to be able to do this. But frankly, not everyone's going to be at that higher kind of Bloom's taxonomy, Bloom's pyramid kind of level to be able to, or even maybe want to get to this level. Frankly, like a B, like getting it, might be just fine for them, and they might have needed more opportunities than just one for this task here, which I would provide. I would offer that. So that's just like an example of how like this row would go, and sort of repeat for that sort of process for row 5. Again, the video is what's really getting this point across, these key terms. For words like campaign or ballot, that's what I've flipped. And then in class, we went deeper into reading some articles, listening to a podcast about how voting has changed. And then they had to show that they get it, right? That you get how elections work compared to how they used to work. And it's actually fascinating stuff that I'm not going to get into right now. And again, the higher level is if they can make their own, either teach someone else with like an infographic. I got some really cool ones, or just for themselves, make an informed judgment. Mission 6 is an example though, which I won't get too deep into right here, but that's just a way of like, for class participation. My standard was that they would basically be able to act like a citizen and absorb the class routines, and then, how well were they doing that and getting involved in those class discussions. So just showing how you can apply something like this, even without having to get things written or submitted that kind of way. How I've been feeling a lot better about giving multiple opportunities to watch the video, show the understanding outside of the class time. And then what we can be doing in class is building this kind of level. So many, many more students are able to get, pretty much everybody's getting to at least like the B range or almost. That's really what I've got to show. So if you come to the live session, we can talk more deeply about this. I have a blog, which I'm probably showing like the thing right down here. I've blogged more recently about some other details about this, like how this works for special ed. For special ed students, like modifications, that's important. How I introduce this to students, and how I even like get those standards, how I get those sort of I can statements, because that's really an important piece as well that I'm not going to get into in this whole video right now. But thanks for making it all the way to the end, and hopefully for Fliptech 20, I'll see you guys in the Zoom. Thanks for watching. Here we are in my recording studio. Yes, that's a large green screen here in my basement next to the boiler there. And so there's the chair that you could hear rolling around on the concrete. And what I did was oh yes, here's my workbench / desk. Ooh, here I am. So what I did was I used Zoom to do the recordings. And what I did was I had the images already set up right here. And then I would just click from one to the other one while I was in front of the green screen. Hi, hand. So that's sort of like the magic of how I ended up making that work. And then I did have to use iMovie to divide some of the things up, like just add little bits of music and clip it all together. But frankly, it wasn't all that hard. I didn't end up doing too much of that. And yeah, the green screen was great, but again, any plain surface would have worked just fine. So that's